Good. All right, so why don't you start by introducing yourself?
So I'm James, and I'm studying architecture at Cambridge, and I'm also the founder and director of BlockWorks, which is sort of a studio of people, and we design things and build things in Minecraft.
Cool. Yeah, so I want to talk to you because I've been interested in a while at the potential intersection of video games and architecture, and you're immersed in the space both really deeply on the building potential of video games. BlockWorks does builds, top-class builds that are just absolutely mind-blowing. And you've assembled a team of 40 people around the globe who are just extreme talents in video game building. But you also have this background in architecture. So maybe we could start a bit with the history. I mean, is there a history of architects being inspired by video games, or have video games really influenced architecture in the past, or is that something?
I mean, typically it's been the other way around, and there's a sort of quite a strong history of video game studios employing architects to make their worlds more immersive, make them more spatially interesting, give them more convincing narratives and things like that. But I think games like Minecraft, which have such a sort of large creative potential, have the possibility to change that.
So it's something we haven't really seen yet.
It's something we haven't really seen yet, no.
And do you think we will see it? And if so, what might that look like?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that what video games can offer is the possibility of designing through playing. And if you're designing something using a video game, you're much more likely to bring a more playful attitude to it, maybe. Whereas if you're in an office and you're using CAD, you've probably got a suit on. It's a completely different perspective you're bringing to the design process. And I think the tool that you use, whether it's a video game or sort of a custom design tool, is going to have a real influence on the work you produce. And I also think if we're talking about something like Minecraft in particular, it has all these possibilities like collaboration over multiplayer servers. Our team, we've got people all around the world. And
I totally lost him. This is a great interview with horrible call quality.
Dear. Yeah, it seems to be dropping quite frequently.
Yeah, so you were saying, let's just try to muscle through it and we'll just deal with it on the edit. So you're talking about teams coming together to work on projects like your team, and how Minecraft allows people to build collaboratively. How does that, when I think of architecture, and I don't know much about it, but it seems like it's something where only the 60-year-old gets to make the decisions. Like young architects often don't get to make buildings. Buildings are very permanent things. Video games are really ephemeral things.
Sure.
Could you, is that gap going to be crossed in any kind of way, or how do we work with that? Or
I think, yeah, there are a few programs. There's a program being run by the UN called Block by Block, and that's setting up Minecraft servers in developing countries. And they get the local community to build in Minecraft what they'd like to see in a local space near them. And that's, the precise point where something in a video game is going to be taken and, built in the real world, which is really interesting. It's pretty much the only project I can think of that's doing that on a large scale right now. Really? But it's certainly happening. How long has that I think we'll see more of it.
How long has that program been going? Often with these first programs, is it a success? How long has it been going on for?
Yeah, no, it's been going for a good 2-3 years now. They've had programs in Kenya, in Haiti, in Indonesia. I think they're rolling out more and more, which is a good sign. And I think it's just a case of waiting to see other institutions and maybe architectural firms making use of that.
Yeah. Are there people in your generation who are sort of more inspired by video games and more likely to have this reverse direction influence than the older architects?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you go back maybe 50, 60 years, so, the architects of today, quite a lot of them reference something like Lego as, a major inspiration. And and Minecraft's, sort of the digital version of that. Really, it's kind of the natural progression of things. And I think just as Lego, inspired architects of today, I think we'll get the architects of tomorrow, having played Minecraft hopefully as a kid. I think it's just the idea of this unlimited world, unlimited resources, and it's literally sort of transferring your imagination into a 3D model in a digital space, and I think that's sort of the ultimate game for most kids.
There's a lot of excitement in the tech world about augmented reality, right? This idea that we could have digital overlays in our physical spaces. Is that the kind of thing that architects are starting to work? How do you design a building with something like augmented reality in mind? Is that something that's practiced, or?
I think the most exciting thing for me would be not just recreating something in AR visually, but also sort of the textures, the feel, that kind of thing. I haven't seen that done yet, but I think that would be the next kind of frontier for augmented reality in architecture, would be more of an immersive experience beyond just what you're seeing. I think a lot of practices are quite excited about the idea of being able to show clients around, sort of augmented visions of their building before it's being built. And I think, as video games and AR is kind of like a match made in heaven.
Yeah. So I know there's another sort of development in architecture, which is the media facade idea of being able to put displays on buildings. And I remember seeing maybe 20 years ago someone did a Tetris on the side of a building, and you're frozen again. But and now you're back. Okay, so someone did Tetris on the side of a building, and you could play the Tetris, and that was maybe a very naive mashing up of architecture and in video games. So maybe I might ask you about that as like another angle of connection. Do you see any other kinds of relationships in terms of facade and putting lights on buildings as having a relationship to gaming, or is that a trend in what do you think of that trend in architecture in general? To put lights and displays on buildings, pixels on buildings.
I see. That's a good one. As I was saying, the idea of having like a facade that you can move around is, it's a dream for most architects, being able to change the appearance of your building. I think what would be interesting is having it customizable, maybe by the public in some way. So, you could go up to the building and you could somehow, change it, not necessarily as the architect, but, as the observer or the user.
Yeah, or maybe some kind of collaborative process.
Yeah, sort of public interaction with architecture.
Yeah. You mentioned something earlier about video games sort of changing the way we see buildings. We were talking about sort of the outside view of CAD. And how do you think like the inside view of a video game changes just how you build a building, how you design a building? Because you've designed structures both ways, right? You've used the CAD tools in Minecraft. And what kinds of actual changes do you see in like how the program is set up and other things based on this change in approach to design? I think you called it the first person.
Yeah, I think the idea of being able to design a building from the perspective of the observer, or as you move through the space, is super attractive to an architect, but it's not offered by the standard tools because it's not maybe the most efficient way of designing. But if you think back to, I think Michelangelo was probably one of the first architects who ever did that. He actually made sort of watercolors and perspective drawings of his architecture, and that hadn't really been done before. And then it kind of got lost when you had all these CAD things and you can design things from a plan view, and you have this exterior God mode that maybe detaches you from the experience of that building. Whereas you go back into Minecraft and suddenly you're not just the designer, you are the human being or the Minecraft character that's using that space. And you're much more likely to think about sort of lines of sight, how the building changes as you move through it, things like that. And those are all important things to consider as an architect, but it's difficult to do that when you're not inside of the program.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. So one thing I think about is like with people spending so much time in games, you see people walking around, on their cell phones all the time. It seems like we're spending more time looking at our digital worlds and not looking at the outside world. Does this make physical architecture irrelevant or less relevant because we're not experiencing the city as much because we're in our screens? Or how does this change the relevance of actually having physical architecture? I'm thinking of futures where it's like we may not even see the building. You might see some augmented thing on top of it, or you're not even looking outside your car. You're just stuck there playing Words with Friends on your iPhone. Does this change how you need to approach architecture? Go.
I think I got most of it. How sort of AR might change.
It's not so much about AR. It's sort of like a harsh question, which is like, look, man, in the future, AR will change it. You won't see buildings anymore. We're all looking at our iPhones anyway. Why does it matter to make a nice looking building? It's like a nice looking building used to be the thing you would look at while you're walking down the street. Now it's like everyone's walking down the street looking at their phones. People are trying to put phones on your face so you don't have to bend your head down. Does this change the role of architecture in our world?
I mean, yeah, I think it definitely does. If we're no longer looking up, we have to change our buildings to suit how people are using them. And if they're not looking at buildings, they're looking at their phone. We've got to make sure architecture somehow suits that. If you walk down the street and you are looking at your phone, it's actually quite difficult to move around. You've got loads of people around you. Moving through a building whilst trying to send an email is not easy because buildings haven't been designed for that. And maybe that's the next phase of architecture, is sort of allowing people to move through it without paying attention to it, which may seem kind of perverse for an architect to say, but if that's how people are using the space, that's what it's got to be designed for.
Very interesting. Are there any other kind of developments around gaming or technology or architecture that I haven't mentioned or asked you about that you find exciting? Anything you're personally excited about in terms of doing? It's like you're a young architect, you're about to go into the world, you have all these digital skills. Like, how do you see things? How would you like to see things evolve? In your ideal world.
I think the most exciting thing for me would be the opportunity for sort of a democratized form of design, especially public spaces. We're heavily reliant on, very few people to design those spaces for us. And I think there are more and more tools now which will enable the public to get involved with what the world around them looks like. And I think we can't rely on, a minority to shape the world we live in. I think that has to be a sort of communal, democratic process.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, these digital tools certainly open up that pathway.